Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. Weekly, we are brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Check out AllAccessMMA.com for our video podcast, MMA stories, and MMA news. On this National Beer Day, how's it going, brother?
Hot as balls, so I gotta drink an ice cold one all by myself out of my Cheers mug, where
Cheers. There you go.
everybody knows my name.
I like it. I like it. So, well, today's beer day. We do have some violence to look forward to this weekend,
Mm-hmm.
kind of across the board, and some
Yeah,
wacky wild, the return of a legendary event, and a UFC pay
yeah,
per view.
yeah. Really quick before we move on, so we we were gonna try to get Hunter Homostek to join us on the podcast. He's actually scrambling. He's got an event. He's the GM at 247 Fighting Championships. There's a full write up on My MMA News about it if you want to read about the event. It's on Saturday. I put a link also in the description for folks that want to check it out. But in a short amount of time, Hunter's been able to take what most regional like MMA promotions don't get to step outside of their little backyard area, and he's crossing state lines already in a short amount of time. So, we were going to try to have him on, but he's literally like either still trying to check into his hotel and stuff. And but I promised him I'd plug the event. That's one thing happening on Saturday. Obviously, I know everyone's all fucking hot and bothered about the UFC 293. We'll be doing our picks for that. But there's also a lot of other shit going on that seems to be going under the radar. If you're a longtime combat sports fan, I don't know what you've been doing this whole time. Maybe you're all distracted by the UFC video game coming out or whatever the hell your problem is.
Well, Fedor's in it. There is a reason to be distracted.
Did you play any of those video games? Like I have literally. If I was able to record it, again, apologize to the folks that the podcast. I'm outside of my regular recording area, but in my gaming shelf in the other room, I have the real fighting video games, which is the Pride video game for PlayStation 2, and whatever the other UFC one.
Undisputed 3, the greatest game of all time.
Yeah.
Pride and UFC. I played all the UFC game. I mean, I go back to Dreamcast. I played the first one ever on Dreamcast and then all the ones up until like the second. I played the first one on the next gen games, like the Endeavor UFC, I guess. Like maybe their first or second version, but I didn't play them very long. They were boring.
I played UFC 4, the last one.
Okay.
I got it because of COVID. We were home. I had nothing. They kept showing. Marketing got me. It was in my face, so I bought it, and I think I did the career mode and finished it. And again, it was COVID, not much to do. Finished it right away. Lost my interest in it. I guess the draw for it is fighting other people online as other fighters or with your made up fighter. I'm an old man, so I like doing other shit. I mean, I do have a Twitch channel. If you want to see what the shit that I like to do, which is pretty much get drunk and play horror games, but that's another story.
No, I mean, I mean, there's been a lot of criticism from the games. You have the hardcore fans that play it just because it is what it is, and that's what I was for a lot of years. But I don't play as many games now as I used to, so it's not a must play for me. But if they bring a Pride mode back and you can do some head stomping and stuff like that, and Fedor and Shogun and Vanderlei and Gary Goodridge and those guys, like it was in the Undisputed game, then I probably will give it a run. At least for that nostalgic reason. But they haven't done great on their games. I don't understand why they don't release all the fighters. They have them all under contract. Seems like that would be one of the.
I was actually surprised to see the Fedor thing, but I guess because they have the licensing of Pride and all that, and Fedor actually shared the image, or whoever handles his social shared the image from the game. So I imagine he's getting something out of it.
Dude, even if he's not getting like money out of it, it's still
you're buying it.
Well, I mean, it's cool to like that he's being recognized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's we got to get beyond the point of like, Frank Shamrock should be in the game. You know what I mean? Like, the pettiness needs to pass, and we need to acknowledge the legends. Because with cards like the UFC's putting on these days, I don't know how many legends you're really going to create. When
seriously,
that's I think that's going to be the long run biggest downfall for the UFC. But
Mhm.
but anyways, we'll get to that card down the line. You wrote an article about the
Well,
chaos about ready to break out tomorrow night for Game Bread.
yeah, Game Bread is doing their bare knuckle MMA. I feel like maybe people are thinking it's just bare knuckle boxing. Composer kind of just shared it and alluded to that, and I put the link of the article that I wrote. I wrote it today because I've been getting the press releases for it, and it's been on my radar. I've shared stuff previously, like that week I was in New York for the PFL event. I was sharing stuff because they had some stuff, media stuff. They had open workouts that week. They had the press conference yesterday, and it just seems to be like it's going under the radar. But I don't think people realize, number one, it's a rematch between two former UFC heavyweight champions, and number two, it's not bare knuckle boxing; it's bare knuckle mixed martial arts. So I just feel like, and again, I know it's heavyweights, so it's probably going to wind up being a slugfest anyway. But I just feel like not enough people for everyone that swears they're fans of combat sports. I mean, you had two former UFC title holders fighting each other, and a rule set that's a little bit outside of what most folks are used to, and that, to me, that's interesting. I'm not sure why other folks aren't interested, and not, to top it all off, it's on fucking YouTube. It's not a pay-per-view. You don't have to be subscribed to any other bullshit. Like, it's on YouTube. Go to the Game Bread, just like this podcast is on YouTube. You can go to the Game Bread YouTube channel. It was the 8 or 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Prime time, it'll be
7:30.
on.
Yeah,
7:30,
yeah.
yeah. And just, it'll be on there for you to watch. Like, wherever you're at. Everyone's, if you've got Android phone, you got YouTube on your phone. Like,
No, actually, I think the event starts at 8 o'clock your time. 5 o'clock. I'm confusing it with the next thing we're going to get into, but 5 o'clock
yeah,
on the
no, I
West
know. There's a
Coast.
lot going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, it's unified rules. It's MMA rules with bare knuckle, which is cool. They had the Roy Nelson, Dylan Kleckler fight in the last one. And actually, while researching or looking into this one, I noticed their main event for the next one's already scheduled, and that one's
Yeah.
Roy Nelson versus Alan Belcher.
Yeah. So
Belcher.
the winner of tomorrow night fights the winner of that.
Oh,
And
okay. So I
yeah,
didn't know.
so
Okay, I gotta catch up on that better then. But
yeah.
that's amazing. There's potential for some real. I mean, Alan Belcher right now is the current BKFC heavyweight champion. He
Hmm.
may end up relinquishing it. Um, I kind of get the feeling because he did a boxing match for, I think, Misfits Boxing. I kind of get the feeling like he reached the pinnacle. It was a tough fight to win the championship. It was a fight he was getting his butt kicked for a long part of it, and then he managed to get a stoppage. I wonder if he kind of just feels like, hey, I got the title there. I'm older in my life now. It's time to go try boxing, or now bare knuckle. But maybe he's just going where the money's at. Who knows what Masvidal's dishing out? But getting back to Verdun and Dos Santos, I mean, it's a rematch. I want to say from UFC 91. It might not be the exact date, but it's right around that era right there. And the story behind the event is that, or the first time they fought, is Verdun. Basically, Dos Santos came in as a not a late replacement, but just a late fight. It was kind of, there wasn't a lot of thing. Nobody knew who he was. He had never fought in the UFC before, so he made his debut against Fabricio Verdun, who was a huge favorite. Um, and Verdun came in out of shape. And if you've seen the fight, or if you haven't, Dos Santos lands one of the biggest uppercuts
Mm.
in UFC history and just crushes Verdun. And huge upset at the time. Really put Dos Santos on the map. Like I said, I had no idea he. I mean, that was a time when I watched the sport like every fight that across the globe, and I didn't know who he was. So I think he was only like 5-0 at the time. So it's kind of a chance for Verdun to get late career revenge, maybe in sort of Tito and Liddell, but hopefully a little less pathetic. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm also like, I mean, he seemed overly like the stuff he said anyway seemed like he had a lot of confidence, and I'm just like, I mean, his shoulder separated in his last MMA fight at Eagle FC, Junior Dos Santos shoulder. So, I mean, and Verdum seemed to like the idea of bare knuckle because he talked about how his submissions can, which is true. The gloves, whether it be 4 ounce, 4 ounce gloves, or you can still do submissions with the 4 ounce gloves, but it's harder to sink in stuff. When you have that wedge in between, and it's hard to slip out of stuff when you have something like the knob to stop your hand from slipping out of stuff. So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting. I still say the fight doesn't hit the ground though.
I hope Verdun tries to take it to the ground though.
Yeah, I do.
I feel like it's not
As a jiu-jitsu
Fabricio
guy, of
Verdun
course.
if he's not like at least attempting to get the fight to the ground. And
Hmm.
I don't think he wants to stand in that fight. Verdun, I mean, yes, he had his beaten up Roy Nelson and Travis Brown and some of those guys, but like I feel like his bread and butter is taking people down and the threat of it all and obviously when you throw in bare knuckle if he manages to get an advantage position um, you can get a little nasty and figure out ways to cut people open and
Oh yeah.
with the bones on your hand you just those guys know what they're doing so I just I I'd like to see Verdun you know, I'd like to see Verdun at least have a good showing. I'd like to see them both. I kind of feel like we know what we're getting with Dos Santos. He's a happy-go-lucky guy. I think he's always going to say yes. He's
Mm.
not. He's always going to be optimistic. I think. I think that's
Yeah.
just who he is as a human being. But I mean, I'm I definitely kind of lean towards Dos Santos knocking his block off. But I'd like to see Verdun. You know, I'd like to see him try to do jujitsu. It'd be cool if it hit the mat, so we at least got to
I'm
experience a couple minutes of that.
yeah.
If it's only one more time in their careers, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I no, I hear you, man. I'm just curious as to because again, that shoulder separation or whatever he had when he fought Jorgen De Castro, and I know it's already a while, long past. He's obviously over. He looked great today. His shoulders didn't look any weird. 'Cause Matt Mitrione's shoulder just randomly pops out.
Mhm, mhm.
It didn't seem like any of that was going on. So I'm just wondering if that affects the power that he had, or how he throws at all. He said, I mean, he didn't say as much at the last press conference that they had, and the face off at weigh-ins today. He looked good, so I'm actually looking forward to that Friday night to start off the weekend.
Yeah, Friday night, then Saturday night, we have the return of a legendary event, K1. The original concept of K1 returning, Michael Chavello on the play-by-play. It's an open weight Grand Prix tournament on the card. So you got big dudes, you got some middle-sized dudes, and going at it in a one night, 8-man tournament. And then they got about a dozen, K1 Max style fights, showcasing a couple champions. Not super familiar. A lot of them are Japanese fighters, but
Mm-hmm.
just if this has a chance to come back and we get back to a heavyweight, we get kind of a circuit again of a Grand Prix of kickboxing. I understand, because there's obviously great kickboxers out there. The handful that are still existing in glory from the older days, the Verhoevens, the Badaharis,
Mm-hmm.
those guys who occasionally pop up, maybe the Ignashovs or some of those guys. But the whole K1, man, I don't know if you really said if I could only bring back one thing, like it wasn't going to be no holds barred. It was the bring back the K1 because that
Mm-hmm.
that event that would take place, 3, 4, 5 times a year that you'd get to watch in the US. I mean, I love staying up late night watching that. Pride had
Yeah.
especially when Pride had kind of disappeared, in 2006 ish, 2007, and all of a sudden for 8, 9. I mean, there was one night they had a 16-man one night Grand Prix tournament. Semi
Mm-hmm.
Schilt win it. It was combined with Dream. It was like it was like a 9 hour, 10 hour event, just nonstop combat sports. And really, I think it was 2009. But yeah, they went on. Overeem won it. Crow Cop won, I think, the last tournament that they
Yeah,
had.
like all these names that you're mentioning, a lot of folks don't even know. Like they've only heard Rogan mention it, and during, when these fighters fought in the UFC, and they talking about high level strikers, and they've only heard him talk about what they did in K1. To see it is it if you were. I know there's a lot of folks that went back and watched those fights after hearing about them and seeing their careers in the UFC, but and in MMA, but it's just it was like it was something out of like a I want to say like I used to like going to like in the back in the 90s, you'd go to the action video aisle and you'd pick up one of these like 90s like kickboxing movies,
Mhm.
like B movies. There was something that was like there was like a cult following or fandom about it, and
It was
that's what
almost a
K1
comic
had.
book. Like, it was like a
Yeah.
comic book level of, like, the way they hyped up the guys and the Ray Cephos and the,
Hmm.
Dewey Cooper was not even a big, huge name in it, but you mentioned Joe Rogan talks about him. He still coaches the MMA to this day, and they talk about his striking. And Glabe Fatosa, they talk about the
Hmm.
question mark kick. When you see that in MMA, Joe Rogan used to bring that name up a lot.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's the other thing
yeah,
too. Like a lot of people will see like striking techniques in MMA and act like it's this, it's some random new thing. No, if you just look, you watch those fights, you'll find a lot of good footage of some great, really really good, not just your standard leg kicks and calf kicks. There's some good liver kicks, spinning kicks, to the soft tissue in the midsection that drop dudes. That was just something beholden to see, and it was not just Muay Thai guys. You had guys from karate, you had guys from Taekwondo. You had it was if it was it sounds weird to say mixed martial arts or striking because when you're talking about mixed martial arts, you're talking about all martial arts. But you had all these different striking backgrounds, people facing each other, and it was just something that was fun to watch. And especially like you said, when it wasn't around, they used to do the replays. MSG Network used to show the replays late at night. And when I used to work in my dad's restaurant, I'd come home and I'd stay up late because that was on, and I'd watch those old fights just because it was just something along the lines of watching a Bruce Lee movie. It was just something fun to watch.
Mark Hunt, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was just nonstop the stuff that would go on. And I mean, and they were just it was just cool the way everything, it was I mean, again, but you always get what I'm thinking of. You're mentioning, so, like a mixed martial arts. I mean, you had Akibono compete in it. You
Mm-hmm.
had Francois Botha, who was like a legit heavyweight boxer,
Mm-hmm.
crossover and do a bunch of K1. Obviously, boxing, it's kickboxing, but um, I want to say you might have even like a Ray Mercer or somebody might have given it a run for a fight. I might be wrong on that one, but Bob Sapp came in. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a at its purest form, it's like the most wild form of kickboxing you really could have, because it's 3 3-minute rounds. There's, you didn't go into decision in a Grand Prix, doesn't do you much good. You don't want to fight 9 minutes. You want to get that fight over as quick as possible. So defense was kind of sparsely used, and it was always big dudes, Remy Bonjowski and Hongman Choi, and I mean, it goes on and on. Um, Michael Chavello on the call. That's going to be nostalgic in itself. The good news is I heard today it's on the Fight. There was some question
Mm-hmm.
about DAZN International, but it's on Fight, the Fight app, FITE. Looks like it's a $14.99 pay per view. And the amazing thing is that if you're on the West Coast, it starts at 7:30 p.m. on Sunday night. Even
Yeah.
10:30 for the East Coast, for
Yeah.
most of the time you're looking at a 2 p.m. start out on the East Coast for any of that Ryzen or any of that, most Japanese events. So an early start here, I'd be able to get most of it done. Hopefully, get the whole event done by 2 3 a.m. here, as opposed to 7 a.m. And
Yeah.
man, I'm excited about it. So
Yeah.
right off the bat, bare knuckle MMA and K1. Holy moly, we're
Yeah.
that's that's
Yeah.
good. That's
So
good news on this podcast.
for sure, for sure. Um, and then we already mentioned Hunter's thing. We talked about Dos Santos. We talked about Dos Santos. We're doing it, and we did K1. So I guess we may as well jump onto this. UFC 293 is also happening this weekend. If you may have heard about it. Uh, the the main event is Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland. Um, I guess because that makes sense for to sell pay per views. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how or why, but that's the main event. Um, yeah. We'll look at the. This is a pretty, to me, the entire cards. They usually do like 13 fights. It looks like it's only 12. A lot of the fights on the early prelims and stuff. You may or may not know many of the fighters. So we'll just jump into the main card. We'll start from top to bottom as we always do. So first fight on the card: Tyson Pedro versus Anton Turkalj. Hope I'm saying that right. Sorry if I'm not. Um,
I'm not even going to try to say his name. He's 0-2 in the UFC. He has a win on the Contender Series. Tyson Pedro obviously lost his last fight as well, but has the experience of winning in the UFC, and the fight's in New Zealand. And I think we might get one of those like Australia, New Zealand kind of clean sweeps across the board here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking Tyson Pedro. First fight of the main card. UFC knows what they're doing when they're trying to keep fans' eyes on. So I kind of expect a beat down in the first, pretty early on in this fight, and Tyson Pedro picking up a win.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that one. I'm going Tyson Pedro as well. And then we have Justin Tafa versus Austin Lane. Again, I mean, you just said, I feel like we'll get they're booking. They know what they're doing when they go to these places, so they have to book a lot of the popular fighters from the region. Most of the time, they do that. New Zealand is Justin Tafa's from New Zealand, and that's pretty much the area that they're in, and I don't see. I feel like he can win. I'm not gonna put anything. Austin Lane looks like he's got a height advantage, but again, I just feel like they just home field advantage goes to the guys that have these these warrior tattoos on them.
When you swing sledgehammers and you got a granite shin, it's
Mm-hmm.
you're hard to beat. It's the Mark Hunt mold.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Lane, I'm always gonna hold against the fact that he could have stopped friggin' Hardy a long time ago. Instead, he lost to Hardy, so we were forced to go through that era of ridiculous fights and no contests and inhalers
I
and
forgot about
everything
that.
else about that. So just for that alone, I'm Team Tafa on this fight. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Tafa by first round knockout. I just that's what they are. That's
Yeah,
what they seem
minus
to do.
238 favorite with the UFC.com. They have the DraftKings odds up. Minus 238 favorite for Tafa. So it looks like we are not alone in our pick there.
No, I mean, Tafa still got a lot to prove. He hasn't had a million fights, so
Mm-hmm.
obviously Lane has the experience advantage. But yeah, I think the hard hitting hometown boy is gonna be okay.
Middle fight on the pay per view: Manel Cape versus Felipe dos Santos. Um, I'm not sure. I guess the UFC doesn't have Felipe dos Santos information. They have him as a brand new and silhouette on the UFC.com. But if you're familiar with Manel Cape's history, it's hard to pick against him. It looks like he had a little sting. He had a little dust up at the press conference yesterday. I don't watch UFC press conferences anymore, so I'm not sure what that was about. But I'm obviously picking him to win.
Yeah, he was going after Kai Kara France in the crowd for canceling their fight on multiple times and showing some frustration. And Adesanya stood up and he didn't back down. He basically told Adesanya to sit down and mind his own business. Kind of a weird thing. I mean, I think Cape's going to Cape's going to destroy him.
Especially if he's got a 0-inch reach and a 0-inch.
Zeros, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's like the amoeba. The amoeba is going to be he'll be hard to submit though.
Yeah. We're just making fun of the UFC.com's.
Yeah, I mean they're only a $9 billion company.
Yeah, but
they're only a $9 billion.
Don't do any
company.
homework
what
on
do you
your
think?
pay per view.
Come on. It's not like they can pay somebody to update their website. We've already established that over the last half decade. Even when they were only a $4 billion company. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go. I think Cape is going to take out a lot of frustration of a wild UFC career as far as like a half dozen fight cancellations, and take out the silhouette that is
Felipe
Dos Santos.
No odds on this one. I wonder why. All right, let's move on. That's a co-main event: Tai Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov. This one is probably outside of the main event, the fight that I'm most interested in, for obvious reasons. Volkov is somebody that I've watched. Tuivasa is a fun fighter to watch. Again, I know we talked about clean sweep because of the location and who's on the card, but I would not be surprised if Volkov could pull off an upset here. I would just not just because of the height and reach advantage, just because of experience on top of all of that as well. I know. I mean, this says Tuivasa is coming off of a loss. I think I had money on him when he lost too, so I'd like him to win. We'll see what the odds are here. They have him as the underdog, rightfully so. I think plus 164 for Tuivasa. on the DraftKings odds against a -198 for Volkov. I feel like Tuivasa wants to pick up a W, but I don't think I can confidently pick him against Volkov here. So I'm going Volkov for the co-main event.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the sweep, but then you get to this fight, and I will
Mm-hmm.
go with Volkov. I feel like this fight should be in the opening round of the K1 Grand Prix, going back to that one. But like this is the kind of matchup that would be perfect on that. Volkov's the better all-around MMA fighter, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has way more aspects to his game, but he doesn't have the one-punch knockout power, as we saw when he fought Derek Lewis years back. It cost him a title shot in hindsight. He can dominate a whole fight, but there's always that big puncher's chance. That's the punch that Tuivasa brings. But I think just Volkov's the better MMA fighter. I could see a stoppage here as well.
Mm-hmm.
I could see a possession, getting in a good dominant position on the ground and forcing a submission or a TKO if he's able to get Tuivasa on his back and kind of
Mm-hmm.
out of his game. So yeah, I'll agree with you there, and I'll go with Volkov.
All right, then we move on to the main event that everybody's all excited about: Israel Adesanya champion versus Sean Strickland, who looks to take the title. It was people were saying, again, I didn't watch the press conference. It's hard for me to watch UFC press conferences these days, but people were saying that Strickland was getting quite the pop when he was over there because of everything he does online. I don't see, outside of his antics on social media, in the cage. And I'm not saying, I mean, obviously, if you're fighting in the UFC, you're not a bad fighter, but MMA math. I know there's no such thing as relying on MMA math anyway, but if you think about the way Alex Pereira handled Sean Strickland, and then you look at Pereira and Adesanya's history, I feel like Adesanya can make short work of Strickland. And obviously, I don't see Strickland beating. I mean, maybe he can, if he can get a takedown, maybe he can get something off on Adesanya. But Adesanya's, he's at the top of his game right now. He's winning, and just he's on an all time high in his career. He's in his prime. He's still young, so I can't see him losing on Saturday.
No, I think he wins. I feel like this is the first fight where he kind of has, a hatred for a word for his opponent since Costa, and he took care of Costa in like a round and a half. So I think that we'll find. Hopefully, we get kind of the aggressive, pissed off Izzy,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the just kind of coasted out Cannonier, Romero. So a couple of those guys where he didn't have a deep heated. There wasn't really any heat between them. So there's some heat here. I don't know if it's real. I don't know. Sean Strickland did seem to get a bit of a pop. I think whether or not you disagree or agree with what he says, like I think some people do appreciate, especially UFC fans, that
Mm-hmm.
type of person might appreciate somebody speaking their mind a little bit more, whether it's idiotic or not. Not holding back in 2023.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's why, and obviously people have their opinions on that, but as a fighter, I agree with you. I just don't see him on that elite level, especially on that elite striking level. If he's able to get the fight down to the ground, I mean, when we talked to John Brumley and Mason Icobellis on the show, who trained with him at Team Quest.
Mm-hmm.
They've both said that he's like uber extremely talented, and obviously he is. He's 27-5 and
Mm-hmm.
fighting for a title, but he's one of the guys that gets mentioned when you're talking to some of those younger fighters
Yeah.
who trained with him. And when you bring that up, of all the guys, I mean, those guys train with a Hall of Fame level of fighters across the board. So
Mm-hmm.
to bring his name up, really shows that
True.
there might be something special with him if he puts it all to use. I don't think standing in front of Adesanya is going to do it. He did to Pereira, like you said, and that was a disaster. I don't think that if he doesn't learn from that, then it's like Boss Rutan. I think one of Boss Rutan's early saying was like, it's okay to get submitted one time, just don't get submitted a second time with the same submission hold. I think that
Mm-hmm.
going back to like his Pancras days, because people got submitted left and right back then, and it didn't mean you were a bad fighter. It just means you were something new, or you were hit with something, and if you didn't learn from it, then that was your downfall, and that was that was kind of the
Hmm.
reason why you didn't develop into the superstar or the champion level. So I think we'll see it. I think Strickland should come out. I think he should try to take Izzy down, at
Of
least bring
course,
that
yeah.
into it. I mean, we say that over and over and over. I mean,
Hmm.
Izzy could be fighting Damian Maya. In reality, we'd see stand-up fight. It's just weird how that seems to develop. Obviously, it's hard to get people to the ground. You can
Yeah.
attest to that better than most. But I, I I just think that that's his only chance of winning. I think every second this fight is on the feet, I think Adesanya is a single strike away from ending the fight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is not one I see him dragging out for the sake of like fandom, whatever. I also think, yes, he avenged his loss against Pereira, but I think in his home, in his home area too, I think it would benefit him to remind fans of the Adesanya that climbed his way to the title with the finishes that he used to get. If he gets if he finishes someone like Strickland, it's just going to cement him, and make him more marketable, and it just his make his stock go up even more if he gets an early finish by the first or second round. You
Is this
know,
the first time you've ever noticed it be Nigeria under Adesanya's name? I feel like he's always been New Zealand.
interesting.
I mean, I know he had obviously the issue with Duplessis, which it
Mm,
became big on their nationalities and all that
I
crap.
didn't even notice that when we were talking about it. I was actually looking at the odds, plus 440 for Strickland as the underdog and minus 600 for. I mean, if you feel like winging it, put some money on Strickland. But outside of that, no, I didn't notice that.
I mean, it'll be interesting because I feel like he's, you know, I, yeah, I always feel like he was always introduced as being from New Zealand. So maybe maybe that's just revisionist history, but I
Mm,
feel like that's how he's always been kind of labeled, right? Like,
yeah.
so to be in Australia, if is he gonna
Well,
is he gonna claim?
he's always kind of rep both. Like he's tried to rep both. So,
I understand that,
yeah,
but
no, but I know you're talking about the website here and what the UFC likes to do to push their product. So, yeah, it could be for that reason because of they're trying to line up that Duplessis. I know Dana White that he was asked about that. I don't remember what his comment was. Again, I have been so tuned out of UFC press conference and media stuff because I mean you just have to fucking turn on social media if you want to catch a clip of something these days because 8,000 people are literally writing the same thing. So you're not missing anything if you don't tune in. But I'll leave it at that.
yeah, but like we said, we just went through the fights. I think they're going to be some good fights. I think there's going to be some finishes. I don't think there's the most meaningful fights in UFC history. Then I think the champ retains. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think a whole lot will be different come Sunday morning as far as the landscape
Yeah.
of MMA goes. But man, I look forward to this weekend. It's something energized. Even if I only catch the last couple UFC fights, just
Mm-hmm.
to know that the K1 will be on the other channel and be fresh off a night of bare knuckle MMA is it's going to be fun. So I think that's what else can you really ask for? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, really, that's across the board. We always talk about the fun aspects and the circus aspects of
Yeah.
combat sports and kind of a little bit of everything.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, the bare knuckle MMA, I feel like has really piqued my interest as I was writing that piece for my MMA news. So, I mean, looking at their history and just remembering, and then just something about bare knuckle. And I remember asking Paulie Malignaggi about this when he went against Artem Lobov. There's something that changes when it becomes more of pretty much what UFC one was. You know what I mean? When there are no gloves protecting you. I mean, you put a mouthpiece in a cupping because you want to protect your own teeth and balls. You know what I mean? But outside of that, it's pretty much I don't blame Werdum for feeling like his submission game is being more dangerous because he's not wearing gloves. It just again the press conference and stuff. I'm a little excited about tomorrow night. I'm like you. I'm actually a little more excited about the bare knuckle MMA and K1 more so than the UFC 293. If I catch the pay per view, you know, I'm sure we'll get some highlights out of the event. ESPN MMA socials do a better job than the actual UFC for showing highlights instead of just a celebration running around. they actually show you the follow, the lead up to the technique that before all the celebrating. So, if you watch it that way, it should be a fun weekend. But it's the first weekend in September, and then then we got a ways to go yet for other stuff coming. But yeah, I'm happy. It should be a good weekend.
Nice. Fans can follow the show on X at Combat Hour, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow myself, Matthew Hawkins, at MMA Hawk 21 on X and Instagram. Follow Edit Carbazol on X, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. And as always, we're brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Check out AllAccessMMA.com for our video, podcast, MMA stories, and MMA news. Always also check out the Bloody Good Show on Twitter, online.
Bloody good show.
Check them out where they got a pool of podcasts, and we're also a group of that. So check out those, support those dudes, and have a good weekend, everybody, and enjoy the rest of National Beer Day or National Beer Night now.
Salute. Yeah.
Good night, and thanks for listening, everyone.